Hey, Y7821, yes you. Pay attention when a guard addresses you. I said come forward for scanning. The large reptilian guard reached for the stun baton on his belt as he approached the cell where a small beige figure was resting against the far wall. He was dressed in the orange and black striped jumpsuit of an isolated inmate. A huge furry hand landed on his shoulder before he reached the cell. Easy, Vex. He's human, doesn't know galactic, and the translators haven't processed any of their languages yet. The reptile hissed at the human, but backed off. That new, huh? So why's he here? I'm not sure. It doesn't really matter. The furry giant grumbled as he turned back down the corridor. He's fresh meat, no claws, dull teeth, no natural defenses. He's safe in medical isolation until the vaccines take effect. But after that, he's done for. Damn it, Krell, there wasn't anything in this morning's briefing about a new prisoner, let alone a new species. We can't do our jobs if they don't tell us anything. Well, it has its upsides. Nobody wants to visit the worst Ultramax in the sector, free entertainment feeds, and there's always the fights to liven things up. You know, there's a bet going on whether he'll be enslaved or killed, and how long it'll take once he's in general population. I put 20 credits on him, lasting 2 days before he's someone's plaything. Come on, the shift's almost over. I'll buy you a drink in the canteen. Krell, just because you have claws, you always assume those without are weak. This one's tough. Something about his eyes. I'll bet 30 on him, lasting a week, and going down fighting till the end. The human watched as the guards passed through the airlock at the end of the cell block, then stumbled to the bed and lay down. His capture had been rough, and the vaccines they'd injected him with weren't exactly designed for human physiology. He wouldn't perish, but he was grateful for the temporary isolation. For now, he could rest and recover without fear of a knife in his back. Soon enough, he'd be among the general population. Then his task could commence. Have you seen anything like him, Plex? The squat amphibian croaked as he leaned towards his thin, scaly companion. Its damp skin squeaked on the worn tabletop between them as they observed the pale figure of the newcomer. No, Julo, and neither have you. How do you know it has a gender, let alone what it might be? Plex hissed softly. Because I listen, Plex. You've got to pay attention to the rumors. It's the only way to survive here. A male, new species, doesn't speak galactic, and the translators don't have his language. Fresh blood, and the predators are already circling. The new prisoner was drawing every visual organ in what served as the prison yard. The surface was hot enough to liquefy lead, so the yard in this instance was a central atrium 50 meters on each side, with walls 20 meters high. Large enough for the block's population to spread out and alleviate claustrophobia, but small enough to be monitored by guards. There were seating areas for different physiologies, a space with crude weights, and in the center, where the domed roof was highest, a structure of intersecting metal bars for those species more adapted to up than out. Around it all ran a smooth, resilient track. Julo watched the newcomer take a long look around at the watchful eyes, glance back at guards Krell and Vex, and then start down the track at a walk. He began running at the turn, his feet pounding out a steady rhythm on the springy material. Tick, 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 tick. Impressive speed, Julo thought, though he wouldn't be able to maintain it for long. Then the inmate hit the next turn. Tick, 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 tick. Look at those stubby little legs move, Julo, Plex said as he leaned over. How long can he keep it up? Don't know, Plex, but look at Dornak's twitch, Julo said as he indicated an enormous leonine creature 30 meters ahead of the human. You know how Leonar loved to chase, and Dornax is not the most evolved of his species. A murmuring spread around the yard as others noticed the furred creature's focus on the new inmate. Julo shook his head as the inmate's pace didn't waver as he neared Dornax. This wasn't going to end well. A deafening roar rent the air as the Leonar launched after the fleeing human. Though bipedal, he adopted a four-legged stance with an incredible burst of speed. Julo had traveled extensively. He'd observed many of the galaxy's species. He'd witnessed how joints connected, how muscles contracted and relaxed. He'd seen the feathered Swiftdale run with their sleek bodies and long, powerful legs. This newcomer wasn't quite at their level, but he was closer than Julo had ever witnessed before. Without breaking stride, he took a quick glance back, then leaned forward and simply accelerated further. Tikak, 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 tikak. Julo was impressed that the human was somehow maintaining his lead over Dornax, but Julo knew the poor soul only had 30 meters of life remaining. If Dornax had pounced and caught his prey immediately, perhaps the human would have survived with just minor injuries, but chasing down his prey like this, it awakened primal instincts, and Dornax harbored a constant simmering bloodlust anyway. The human would be forced to slow down to navigate the corner, and it would be over. Julo looked at the guards, but they were shaking their heads. They weren't going to intervene now, just clean up the aftermath later. No, he could only watch as the other inmates cheered on the hunt as the human approached the turn, and ran straight up the wall. Dornax hit the wall at full speed, meters below the human, who pushed off the wall and hung suspended in midair. The human tucked his legs as he flipped. Dornax hit the ground, and the human's feet landed on Dornax's neck with a crunch. The human looked up from the motionless form at his feet, gazing over the stunned prison yard at the frozen guards for a moment, before pushing off and resuming his pace. Tuck, 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 tuck. Kivala perched in the yard, observing. This was the only time it could truly rest. It could sleep in the cell, safe behind the bars, but the sleep was restless and uncomfortable. It wasn't built to sleep lying down. It was not provided adequate bedding to form a nest, and there was no way to get a satisfying grip on the edge of the bed there. So it got what sleep it could, then climbed to the top of the artificial tree in the prison yard and rested for the allotted time each day. It was merely a pleasant bonus that it could observe everything occurring in the yard. No spacefaring species could surpass Zephic's eyesight, and Kivala had utilized this advantage to learn how different species moved when they communicated. It didn't need to hear every conversation when it could read lips, mandibles, even body language if a being was facing away. As such, it was very well informed of what each individual thought of the new arrival. It watched intently, interpreting the new prisoner's body language, noticing Dornax's inclination toward pursuit before he had moved an inch, the absolute confidence as the fresh meat outran the Leonar, and the disdain as it delivered a terrible blow from above. Kivala approved. That was how it would have taken down prey, breaking the neck instantly with a single devastating strike. Unfortunately, it could see Dornax still drew breath, not a true killing blow. The newcomer continued its loping while the yard was nearly silent. If there had been a fight, or if Dornax had mauled the new arrival, there might have been a riot. This was so swift, so unexpected. Other inmates just sat while guards eventually moved out and collected Dornax. Kivala doubted the beast would ever leave the medical wing. Oddly, the guards left the newcomer to run around the yard. The protocol is to put any combatants back in the cells after an encounter to prevent retaliation. Immediate retaliation, at least. The newcomer maintained its pace for about a third of the allotted time in the yard, then approached the artificial tree. Was it going to attack? But no, it just performed some slow movements, sometimes placing a lower appendage on the branches and reaching an upper appendage to touch the end of its lower appendage. Then it stood below a branch, gave a little hop to grab the branch with its upper appendages, and began to repeatedly touch its beak to the branch. Dull. Kivala looked around, checking the other inmates, reading what they were saying. They all focused on the newcomer in its exercises. Some were discussing its speed and strength. Others were talking about how it just got in a lucky shot on Dornax. Others were talking about poisoning it and taking it out that way. But all who spoke were speaking about the newcomer. The rhythmic vibrations shifted under Kivala's claws. It peered down as the newcomer swung its lower limbs up and hooked its knees on the metal limb. It touched its head with its manipulators and began to repeatedly curl upwards toward the branch. This newcomer's ease on the tree was noteworthy. Few on the block utilized Kivala's tree, and it was unusually at ease being in a position to expose its vulnerable underside. Kivala scanned the area again. There were many puzzled looks in the yard. This was not typical behavior. Newcomers usually found a group to join and submitted, or challenged a leader to gain standing. This one simply disregarded the others and did as it pleased. And now it showed disregard for everyone by hanging upside down and displaying its belly. Yet there was no attack. Some glanced at the guards, others observed the newcomer, searching for some trick. All the while, it just kept curling up to the branch and back down. After a time it paused, extending its upper limbs toward the ground, and began to sway back and forth. Then on the backward swing, as its body nearly paralleled the ground, its lower limbs slipped off, and it landed upright before simply walking back to the track. It then ran even more for the entire remainder of the allotted yard time. It was identical the next day, and the day after that. Each day, Kivala would perch on the artificial tree, and each day the newcomer, this human, would run the track, use Kivala's tree for exercise, then return to running. The human's novelty faded after a couple days. The fear from how it had incapacitated Dornax in a single strike lingered a bit longer. Eventually, though, as the larger predators grew accustomed to its detached presence, they persuaded themselves that it was a fluke that this small, soft creature had managed to paralyze a large Leonar. Of course, Kivala had observed their discussions, knew their scheme, knew what was coming, so it was prepared when the seemingly random wandering of several reptiles just happened to converge on the human as it was hanging upside down doing its curls. As the circle tightened, the human executed a swift flip off the branch, landed with a stutter step, and turned to put its back against the tree. Kivala snorted as the leader, a large lizard called Grax, stepped forward with a sneer. "Heard you don't know, gal, but you'll understand this. Lie at my feet," Grax said while pointing at the ground, "or I'll eat you." He snapped his heavy jaws. There were chitters and clicks of amusement from his companions, and one, "You tell him, Grax Dav." "Eat? Human?" Grax snorted. "You speak?" Kivala couldn't see the human's face, but its body language had shifted forward, eager yet not tense. It had been scanning all the reptiles, but now focused intently on Grax. "Eat human you?" Grax erupted in laughter. "No, human. I've eaten many things in species, but I've never even seen one of you before. Want to be the first?" Kivala noticed the human's shoulders shift. Still ready, but no longer eager. It had shown emotion. Was it sad? Grax paused before continuing. "Lie down, human." It had resumed scanning the other reptiles, almost ignoring Grax. Kivala wondered if it was a calculated insult, or if the small creature truly didn't care about the 2-meter mass of scales and fangs threatening it. "Last chance," Grax growled as he stepped forward and reached for the human's shoulder. The human sidestepped, grasped Grax's wrist, and pulled. Grax's eyes widened as the human flowed along the outside of his arm, touched the back of his head, and gently guided it onto the tip of a metal branch. The human returned to the track and resumed running as Grax convulsed and his lackeys fluttered around. Some moved to pull him off the branch, only to be blocked by others insisting that would just make him bleed out. Most simply stood in shock until the guards rushed up and cleared the area while calling for a medic. The human had displayed so little emotion during the brief confrontation. No joy at besting an opponent, no remorse for likely killing a fellow sapient being. The only emotion it had shown was when Grax mentioned eating humans. Kivala ruffled its feathers and shifted on its perch. Something had occurred, and recently if human languages had not yet been translated. Such an intriguing mystery. Kivala cackled as it observed the form below gradually cease twitching, the scent of blood sharp in the air. Even it hadn't anticipated this outcome. The human was the most entertaining thing Kivala had experienced in ages. It was feeling so pleased. Perhaps it would even reveal to the new arrival who had been consuming humans. "My." So then I says to Draco, I says, "You don't go tugging on those tentacles, you don't know where they've been." Lenzo chuckled as he concluded the story between mouthfuls of protein mush. The small Quillian didn't mind that his dinner companion was quiet. Few species enjoyed social eating. In fact, it was uncommon enough that meals were served in cells to avoid territorial disputes. It worked out better that way, really, since he had more time to share his stories. And if his dinner companion didn't appreciate his tales, well, tough luck. The human would have to break through 2 sets of bars to get from its cell across the hall and into his. He may have slain a Tundora and nearly killed a Leonar, but plasteel bars didn't yield for who you did or didn't kill. Lenzo groomed his whiskers and took another careful bite of mush, rinsing his fingers in some water as he chewed. You'd think they could provide some kind of eating utensil, but the various forms of digital manipulators baffled the prison designers, so they just slid a tray of nutritious, if bland, mush through the bars twice daily. He swallowed the mush and glanced across the hall at the human. Hey, you're going to make yourself ill wolfing down the food like that, Lenzo said sensibly while cleaning his whiskers. You may not have been blessed with my fine purple tail, but you still got to look after yourself. All that running you do in the yard, you're going to get indigestion. Lenzo paused to smooth his tail and take another quick bite. He washed his fingers while he chewed and swallowed. Take it from me, you got to take care of yourself. I mean, Lenzo said as he leaned forward, I shouldn't even be here, so I got to be in top shape when I get out, you know? I mean, I know I'm fortunate to have connections out there, people who owe me. I got a place to return to. Lenzo took a bite and rinsed his fingers, then pricked a tufted ear as the human finished his tray of mush. What's that? Why am I in here? Well, I don't know, I mean... All right, he said with a laugh. You've convinced me, no need to plead. Lenzo sipped some water and groomed behind his ears. You know I shouldn't be in this wing, of course. I mean, I'm Quillian. I'm hardly a meter tall. I should be an Aleph 9 with the other species, my size, dietary needs, and so on. But I have this flaw, you see. When someone offers me money, I take it. Perhaps the guard didn't realize he was offering it. But what did he expect leaving his vest open with a cred card in the inner pocket? And really, if he didn't want me to access the creds on the card, he would have used stronger than 12-factor encryption on it. Simple misunderstanding, really. But no, I end up getting reclassified and moved here. With the Leonard and Tundora. And human. He took 2 quick bites and rinsed his fingers. He asked, cupping his ear. Oh, you meant, why am I in the prison at all? Oh, well, that's quite a tale. No, I don't mind if you exercise while I talk. Go right ahead. You'll get cramps, though. Don't say I didn't warn you. Lenzo smoothed his whiskers and groomed through a patch on his lower back, while the human kicked up on his hands with his feet straight up in the air and started lowering his head to the ground and pushing back up. Lenzo shuddered at the exercise, though the human did have an appealing pattern of dark swirls in his pale skin when he took his jumpsuit off. He couldn't compare to Lenzo's own swirls of violet and indigo against lavender. But who could? Lenzo rubbed his hands together as he began. So, there I was, extracting some creds out of Twilight 47 Station by the Nyler Colony. Nice little place if you like rocks and salt water, but not for me. I was working with a crew, we'd grabbed a few unsecured creds like this, creds that were practically just sitting there. I get in the systems, the firewalls were laughable, simple encryption, and there were backdoors everywhere. But Fenn, he was working the crowd and got tipped, so what's he do? He bolts for the ship, with security on his tail. I try to create a distraction and flip a few switches to activate airlocks. Don't give me that look. I knew the failsafes would kick in and nobody would get hurt, just some nice pretty lights and very loud alarms. And the emergency doors would come down with just 1 or 2 security on our side. We take them out, pop the seal, and be off on our merry way. Sadly, he exhaled while brushing his whiskers, there were some shortcuts taken during construction. The safety interlocks weren't properly installed, so the sensors on the automated systems were getting constant false positives. Failsafes didn't activate, safety doors didn't shut, we got trapped. Atrium 3 was exposed to vacuum, and 12 perished. Found out during the trial, Aquilian had been involved in the construction contract. Can you believe it? I mean, really, who allows one of us to construct a station? They should have known you don't partner with Aquilian when lives are at stake. Pretty awful, but an accident, right? Not my fault the interlocks were defective, but one of the deceased was the sibling of someone with connections. The whole process was biased, and I end up here. Lenzo trembled, then swiftly smoothed and groomed his fur. He glanced at his empty tray. Finished already? Huh. Got caught up in my tail, I suppose. A flick of his finger sent the tray spinning through the feed slot on the floor. Well, that's my unfortunate story. What about you? Lenzo paused, then leaned forward. Oh, you want me to guess? I couldn't possibly... Oh, well, if you insist. Oh, I bet you were raised on an agricultural world and found work on a farm. The farmer's daughter began making romantic advances, but you lacked wealth, so you set off to seek your fortune, only to be captured by pirates outside your system. Vex muted the audio feed and observed Lenzo chattering at the human on the monitor. He almost pitied the human. Nobody should have to endure Aquilian's senseless babbling. He turned back to his data screen. The intake paperwork was nearly blank, some biodata for nutrition and environment needs, but no name, no language, nothing about his species. Searching the datanet hadn't yielded much either. Some trading, with a few human merchants reporting minor piracy. Some religious types had departed human space to spread their messages, but fairly minor. Formal relations were still in very early stages, with ongoing discussions in Galactic. They didn't seem to have translator technology, but a few humans had somehow learned Galactic and a few pigeon trade languages. Vex grunted in frustration. Why was the human here then? A member of a new species, doing something noteworthy? It would have been all over the news feeds. He nearly kills Dornax, but the guards are told to leave him in the yard. Then he does kill Grax, and still they're told to leave him. It just didn't add up. That's how you get a riot. Control Guard TK-421 requesting Open Door 3B9 for transfer of prisoner C-2293. Vex glanced up at the call. Krell was at the Quillian cell. TK-421, this is Control. Krell, what's going on? I don't have any transfers scheduled. Hey, Vex, hit a refresh. It just came through. Looks like the Quillian's file was audited. I'm to take him over to Keter for processing. Odd. Nothing happened quickly around here. But sure enough, when Vex checked the schedule, it updated to show the transfer. All clear, Krell. Control opening door 3B9. Vex cleared the door on the touchscreen with his passkey, then watched, one claw on the alarm button, as Krell attached Lenzo's restraints and led him out of view. Thrum grumbled at the trash on the floor. He'd almost made it to the hatch. Just because he was nocturnal, he got to collect all the garbage. Every night, a simple bot could have done it. But no, they had free prison labor, so the prisoners labored. Which meant he walked around with rancid protein mush stuck in his fur, while loading all the garbage from the main kitchen on a cart, wheel it the length of the prison, get more garbage from the guard's kitchen, wheel it some more, get even more garbage from the guard lounge, then wheel the now teetering cart over to the exterior hatch and dump it down the chute to the holding pen, where it would be incinerated by focusing mirrors when the sun rose. And if at any time he lost control of the cart, like just now, he got to clean it all up and mop the floor. He started lifting the bags back up onto the cart. Well, he thought, at least this time, none of them. Thrum sighed. One of them had ripped. He grabbed a mop from the cart and started gathering the mess. Sacks of something unappetizing, cans of something else, some bones. Bones? Thrum had worked in the kitchens. They didn't have real meat, let alone bones. Even for the guards, it was too costly to transport. He pulled the mess from the pile, wiped at it, then swiftly cleaned everything and tossed it all down the chute. It wasn't worth risking his life. He shook his head as he went to clean up. He hadn't found much. Some small ribs, perhaps an arm or leg bone. Maybe someone had smuggled in a treat. Perhaps. Vex observed as the human ran around the prison yard. Again. The inmates gave him a wide berth, and he didn't push them. He could have formed his own group, demanded some of the prime contraband that always got in, even here. But he had left them alone as long as he was left alone. The only one that had even attempted to have a conversation was that Quillian, and the human had in no way encouraged the exchange. He's running again? Krell said as he stepped through the door. Yeah, I wonder if it's his physiology, like the Breezians where their lungs don't fully open up unless they flap their arms. The Breezians used to have wings and needed to fly to breathe. I doubt this guy's ancestors had wings. I do wonder about his background, though. He couldn't outrun a Swiftdale, but he could outlast one. And those reflexes. Krell shook his head. What kind of planet makes it so the survivors have to run for that long and still have reflexes like that? Yeah, I've been wondering about that myself. I tried to do a bit of research. Not only could I find nothing on his species background, but there was no name on file, no biostats beyond basic nutrition and environmental requirements, no language. I couldn't even find his crime. It was sealed above my level. That is odd, Krell said with a heavy brow. Who was the transferring agent? Just Jackson, Vex said, tilting his head at the ceiling while keeping his eyes on the yard. But the human was a late addition to a full ship, so Kill had its claws full during the transfer at Celestia. The guards had all the necessary credentials and encryption keys, but had opaque helmets and no identifying marks that it would recall. Then the human got here, and the paperwork was cleared by the warden himself up on the station before being shipped down here. Ah, the warden's probably occupied. An assistant might have approved the admission, and even if he did it himself, he mightn't have scrutinized it too closely. You're acquainted with him, aren't you? Perhaps you could inquire about the human. What? Why would I be acquainted with him? Krell said, edging towards the door. Well, Vex turned to Krell. You join those safaris with him, don't you? There was that one a couple months back that you invited me to. Oh, no, Krell chuckled lightly. Well, yes, I do go on safari with him, but I'm just a helper. My uncle knows someone, and I tag along to carry things and maybe participate in a hunt, but I don't interact with the warden. Vex turned back to the yard. Is there another hold-on? Why's the human on the ground? Vex gazed across the yard where the human lay motionless at the foot of the tree while Kivala perched above. Kivala crouched on its perch, observing the human jog around the track again. He had fastened the top of his jumpsuit around his waist, revealing an intricate pattern etched into his skin. As the human began towards Kivala's tree, it extended its wings, shuddered to adjust a few feathers, and glided down to a branch near the human's usual spot. Wings tucked, it quivered, then groomed a few feathers that wouldn't settle. It then drew its bald head into its feathered shoulders and waited, half closing its eyes and slowly surveying the yard. As anticipated, the few inmates who had been loitering near the tree found other places to be as the human neared. The human gave Kivala a keen look as he approached, but continued walking to his usual branch and began stretching. Kivala was familiar with the human, knew his reactions, and staring wouldn't affect him at all as long as Kivala didn't attempt any contact. But it might draw unwanted attention from others, so Kivala kept its gaze at an angle. The human performed a few stretches while Kivala waited patiently. As the human's head came closest to Kivala, it croaked softly, I possess something you desire, human. The skin above the human's eye twitched, but he quietly continued his exercises. You reveal yourself to my gaze, human, Kivala hissed. You respond as others converse around you, subtle yet visible. So do not feign ignorance now. The human observed Kivala from the corner of his eye, but otherwise didn't acknowledge Kivala's words. It glanced over the yard, monitoring conversations, noticing Krell and Vex by the entrance. You are near, human. I do not know how you followed your prey across the cosmos, but I know what drove you. Retribution. I don't know for whom, but I know for what. Love. Kivala looked down as he purred. Someone here devoured your love. The human stepped back and gazed at Kivala, his brow furrowed over narrowed eyes. Kivala extended its wings. Oh, do not fret, human. Kivala clicked its beak. I am here to assist your pursuit. You are close and your quarry is in danger. Someone has been contracted to poison you. You have proven clever and resilient, human. But we all have our limits. I cannot identify your prey, human, Kivala wheezed as it noticed Vex turn to converse with Krell. But look past the yard. It nodded toward the guards, then dropped from its perch and skimmed the yard before ascending and circling back above its tree. The human was peering across the yard at the guards. Kivala flexed the spurs behind its talons as it tilted and plunged in a tight arc around the tree. A swift flash, a lethal breeze, as Kivala whirled in the space between the human's back and the tree, and its spurs grazed the human's skin. It had ample speed as it pulled up and around. A few quick wing beats, and Kivala settled atop its tree once more. Kivala watched the human stumble and collapse as the mixture of neurotoxins rapidly took effect. It wasn't certain about the human's biology, if the toxins would be fatal or merely debilitating. It didn't care. It was to administer the toxin from the vial it had received, a vial that had arrived after the morning meal, along with sufficient material to construct a proper nest. The other prisoners in the yard had only just begun to notice that the human had fallen when Vex reached his motionless form. Krell was a few seconds behind, calling for some assistance as Vex examined the human. He was alive but rigid, muscles contracting and back arched as his wide eyes gazed at the domed ceiling of the prison yard. Vex could detect blood, but couldn't see any injuries. Krell, he said as the leonine guard came running over. Help me turn him on his side. I smell blood. Krell crouched, and on the count of 4, Vex lifted while Krell steadied and held the human on his left side. Yeah, I see 2 long, shallow cuts, Vex said softly. Probably shivs. I don't know any inmate with claws this far apart. Not much blood, though. I think we can just carry him as is to the infirmary. He's already stiff as a board, Vex finished with a snort. Huh. Krell coughed deep in his chest. Yeah, I suppose that would work. I don't want to give these guys any opportunity to attack while he's down. Krell lowered the human's left arm and leg into Vex's hands, then grabbed the other arm and leg. 1, 2, 3, 4. And they lifted and headed for the door to the infirmary. Ren, Vex said to the newly arrived guard, hold that door. Startled, the tall guard jumped, his head plumage bouncing, but still managed to hold the door as the three came rushing through. Vex started left toward the nearest infirmary, but Krell grunted, No, we don't know what's wrong with his system. The big medical bay is the most complete we have, and it's just a couple more minutes. Vex nodded, conserving his breath. The human was relatively small, but incredibly dense. Vex made a mental note to check the meal schedule. They couldn't be feeding him enough to maintain this much muscle mass. Krell was right. It was just another minute or so to the large infirmary, but Vex was about to drop by the time they reached it. Vex couldn't tell the guard, stationed at the door, to open it, just nodding instead. Fortunately, the Balonar understood and shifted his wide brown frame, holding the door as they came through. They dropped the human on the nearest bed, and Krell managed to say between gasps, Go! Backtrack and clean up! Any blood! The guard nodded, his round face solemn as he backed his bulk through the door, which shut behind him. Vex leaned against a wall, just catching his breath for a moment. He gradually became aware that they were alone in the infirmary. Krell, Vex said, stepping away from the human's bed and peering around the curtains. Where are the medics? There's not even someone watching Dornax. Don't worry about it, my friend, said Krell as he came around the end of bed. He placed a massive furred hand on Vex's shoulder. It's not important. I just wish you'd come on that safari with me. What a yai, Vex managed to say before the stun stick struck him in the back. Vex seized up as a stuttering crackle filled the room, then fell to the ground. Krell dropped the stick, stepped over to the wall, and searched through a few drawers before retrieving a thin foil-wrapped package. He turned back to the semi-conscious Saurian. I am sorry, Vex, truly I am. Krell shook his head as he paced slowly back to Vex. But it's your own fault. You've been just too inquisitive. We can't have you running around. The human who has already killed twice, or near enough, faked injury, broke free, and wrestled away my stun stick. Krell peeled back the foil and examined the object within as he crouched by Vex's head. Then he found a scalpel in the drawer and cut your throat. Vex whimpered, claws scraping on the cold tiles as he inched his sluggish body across the floor. A boot pressed firmly on Vex's wrist. Shush now? We've known each other for, 5 years? It'll be quick and painless. Krell knelt and stroked Vex's cheek with his offhand before gently lifting the scaled jaw. Krell brought his other hand around with a whisper of steel on scales and murmured, You'll just fall asleep. Krell stood and stepped back from the spreading pool, breathing deeply as an iron scent filled the air. Well, human, Krell said as he turned to the creature, sprawled on the bloody hospital bed, arms stretched over the top of the mattress. I don't know how aware you are. We erred on the side of caution when we gave the Zephix the vial and its instructions, so you may be out of it for a while. A heavy hand swatted at the human's limp body. The muscles seemed to have relaxed. That's good. Don't want you to get too tough. Krell let out a deep chuckle as he turned towards the unconscious Dornax. Oops, he remarked, giving a cord a slight pull. Seems you had a grudge against the one who escaped, human. A piercing alarm was quickly silenced with a button press, and Krell returned to the foot of the human's bed, his jaw dropping into a toothy smile. Your turn, human. We. Krell's jaw snapped shut. What? Who? Is. We. Ha. Krell coughed deeply. You're quite amusing, human. Is this biology or just stubbornness? Well, you'll find out soon. He wanted to ensure you were done. Krell glanced over his shoulder as a chime sounded from the airlock in the distant wall. Ah, right on cue. Krell stood respectfully as the lock cycled for 5 seconds, then opened to reveal a being covered in mottled green and gray chitin. Low to the ground, with 6 legs on the abdomen, 2 modest limbs on the upright thorax, and two intimidating clubbed appendages held close to the chest, the creature was topped by a teardrop-shaped head with large compound eyes, two drooping antennae, and four fierce mandibles. A shrill buzz filled the air. "Everything is taken care of?" A small box on the insect's chest translated. "All loose ends have been tied up, Warden," Krell said with a gesture that encompassed Vex's cooling body and the flashing lights on Dornax's monitor. "All personnel have been ordered, or bribed, away from this area, and all recording devices and monitors are being fed a recording from last night. All set." "Oh?" Krell flinched as the warden appeared beside him, privacy curtains fluttering in his wake. "What of the Stracellian?" "Ah, the remains were dealt with," Krell said hastily, licking his lips as he looked down. Though nearly 3 meters long, the warden's head barely touched Krell's bearded chin. "No concerns, sir." The delicate head tilted with a brief buzz. "Do you think I rely solely on you? A portion was discovered. I had to intervene. Your lack of control is concerning." "Sir," Krell stammered, his voice strained. "Someone was approaching. I had to dispose of—" A thunderous boom shook the human on the mattress and sent a gust against the curtains as Krell slammed into the wall by the prison door. The dented wall cradled him momentarily. His chest collapsed, gazing bewildered at the warden's extended club limb. Gravity slowly peeled him from the wall, leaving him crumpled on the floor as the scent of ozone and burnt hair permeated the room. "Now, all loose ends are resolved," the box recited, as the warden gradually retracted its club limb and turned towards the human. A whisper of wind, and the warden was beside the main doors. A small appendage unfolded from his chest to engage the lock. Another breeze followed his appearance by the blood-stained hospital bed. Someone might investigate the commotion, and we wouldn't want to be disturbed. The box on his chest translated as he buzzed. The warden's head cocked, the large eyes gleaming in the overhead lights. "You are a fascinating being, so determined, so resourceful, far superior to my former assistant. Only a few months since we had our sport with the human vessel on our safari, and you managed to not only locate my guard, but infiltrate my prison?" The small appendage unfurled again, gingerly touching the human's chest. "And now I presume you intend to end my existence? You worked so diligently, I suppose it only fair to caution you. It will not succeed." The appendage retracted, concealing itself behind the left club. "You are no match for my velocity. You are no match for my power. My chitin is the most resilient organic substance in the galaxy. My strike is so forceful, I can miss and your internal organs will still rupture from the shock wave." The elegant head lowered as his box intoned, "It is futile." The human's arm lashed out at the exposed neck, passing through empty space as the warden effortlessly evaded the clumsy blow. "It seems you don't believe me," he buzzed. "You will see shortly. In the meantime, we shall assess your fluency. I know you comprehend more galactic than you let on, but how proficiently do you speak?" The warden materialized abruptly at the bed's foot, holding Krell's discarded scalpel in one delicate hand. "Now, human, who are you collaborating with? How did you plan to escape?" "Olivia Rose," the human replied slowly. The warden stiffened. "I am not acquainted with that name." "Olivia Rose, my daughter, was aboard that ship," he stated more assertively. "That does not answer." "Olivia Rose, my only child," the human bellowed. "You consumed her." Another thunderous boom filled the room, the bed twisting and shifting beneath the human as the warden's club smashed it. The room settled gradually, torn curtains fluttering to the floor around the warden as his club arm slowly retracted. "Agitation is counterproductive. I would administer more toxin to soothe you, but I fear it may impair your mental faculties." The warden approached the bed as it lay crumpled sideways against the wall. The human sprawled unceremoniously facing away from the warden. "Now, if you do not wish to follow your offspring, you shall answer my inquiry." A soft wheezing drifted through the room. The warden hesitated. "I hope you didn't damage your respiratory system, human." The human slowly rolled onto his back, eventually coming to rest facing the warden with his left arm still tucked against the wall and his right arm dangling awkwardly off the bed's edge. "That was amusement," the human said slowly, blood trickling from his mouth. Your threat holds no power over me. How do I escape? Look there. The human vaguely waved his bent right arm at the spigots in the wall above the bed. Many gases, for many creatures. I can read only some letters of galactic, insect, but chemicals are similar. Krell was distracted with the other guard, drug wore off enough, and I can read CH4. Odorless and filling the room while you talked. All I needed. The human raised his left arm from behind his back, holding the shorn end of an electrical cord, was a spark. What do you suppose happened to the human, Plex? The squat amphibian asked as he advanced his piece on the game board. Maybe Somi once slipped Somethin in his food. Don't really care. He was unsettling. No fur in those eyes. The thin lizard paused to examine the board, then picked up a piece. A giant hand swatted Plex out of his chair a split second before every alarm in the prison went off. Plex sat up, coughing in the dust filtering down from the domed ceiling. Julo's lips moved, but no sound came out. What? Plex screamed, trying to stand up. Julo bounced to his feet, grabbed Plex's arm, and they nearly flew to the nearest wall in a long leap. He stuck his wide mouth by Plex's ear slits. I said, something exploded. Plex looked around, spotting one of the guard's doors hanging from a hinge. Prison break? Don't know, Plex, Julo said, pulling Plex toward the wing of the prison farthest from the obliterated door. But I think that was the door that Vex and Krell took the human through.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.